more pessimistic than at our previous update some 6 months ago. Global growth will be substantially lower with higher and more persistent inflation. We now project global growth this year at 3%, a downward revision of 1.5% with respect to our December projections, and a further slowing next year to 2.8%. Projections for consumer price inflation have also been revised significantly upwards. We project inflation this year to average nearly 9% across the OECD, more than double our previous projection. We do expect inflation to recede slowly in 2023 as supply chain and commodity price pressures wane and monetary policy measures continue to take effect. This challenging moment in our shared history is why dialogues as this one facilitated by this forum are so important. Many of the challenges we face can only be solved through effective global cooperation. Under the Indonesian G20 presidency, the T20 continues to do very important work, including and in particular with your focus on addressing the climate change challenge and setting a clear pathway for the renewable energy transition. The fact is that the world urgently needs more ambitious and more effective action on climate change. More and more countries around the world have and are committing themselves to the goal of net zero emissions by or around mid-century. While commitments are important, though, real action and real outcomes are what ultimately really matters. In spite of significant progress, near-term policy actions on climate remain insufficient to meet our Paris Agreement objectives. Different countries in different parts of the world have different starting positions and face different circumstances and different opportunities to make their best contribution to solving the global climate change challenge. Which is why it is entirely understandable and appropriate that different countries facing different circumstances will use different policy approaches, different policy mixes to reach the same objective of carbon neutrality by mid-century. However, that diversity of policy approaches makes understanding their combined global impact more challenging and also elevates the risk of counterproductive negative spillovers. The challenge then is to ensure that the level of climate ambition and effort in individual jurisdictions can be lifted to the level required to reach global net zero emissions by 2050, while maintaining to the greatest extent possible a global level playing field. To really drive the necessary increase in climate ambition and effort around the world, we need to find ways to avoid counterproductive impacts on international trade competitiveness, causing carbon leakage as a result of lifting climate ambition and effort using different approaches around the world. We need to improve the level of international multilateral dialogue and cooperation. That is why last week the OECD Ministerial Council agreed to establish a major new initiative for an inclusive forum on carbon mitigation approaches, which will be modelled on the success of the G20 OECD inclusive framework on base erosion and profit shifting. This initiative is designed to help facilitate an evidence-based multilateral exchange of information about the different efforts around the world to reach net zero emissions. Over time, better data and information sharing about the comparative effectiveness of different carbon mitigation approaches and the sharing of best practices to reach net zero emissions will help inform better decisions around the world. The inclusive dialogue of the forum will also help contribute to a globally more coherent and better coordinated approach to climate mitigation policies. Given the global nature of the climate challenge, the success of the project in addressing climate change will rely on the widest possible participation. Participation of non-OECD G20 countries will be particularly important. Our proposal is for an inclusive multilateral dialogue which involves advanced and emerging economies as well as developing economies from around the world on an equal footing. This dialogue, informed and facilitated by technical and objective analysis, will help ensure the global effectiveness of combined carbon mitigation efforts, also by working to avoid any negative spillovers. Let me briefly touch on 3 additional priorities for the green transition and the digital transformation as central themes of this year's Global Policy Forum. First, aligning recovery efforts with the net zero transition is a significant opportunity to boost green growth. We must mobilize the necessary investment toward the green transition. Getting the world on track for net zero will require nearly $4 trillion US of annual investment in clean energy by 2030. This is a 4-fold increase on current levels of investment. Governments alone cannot possibly get this done on their own. The private sector must be part of the solution. And to get there, we need to transform financial markets to better incorporate long-term climate risks and opportunities. Investors need to have confidence that investments labelled as green are genuinely contributing to environmental sustainability. And we must ensure policy and regulatory frameworks that support the necessary scaling up of private finance and investment in clean energy. Second, we need to ensure that the green transformation goes hand in hand with the digital transformation in a mutually beneficial and reinforcing way. Digital technologies have a key role to play in support of the green transformation. They enable green innovation, including to improve energy efficiency, smart meters, active power grids and servers, and artificial intelligence. And they improve the energy efficiency of industrial activities. But there are trade-offs that will need to be managed. The rapid growth in digital technologies has a large and growing carbon footprint, generates electronic waste, and poses additional sustainability challenges in the supply of critical minerals. Concerted policy action is needed to maximize the benefits and address the trade-offs of these twin transitions. Third, we need to support a transition that is fair and people-centered. As I've already mentioned, every country has a different starting point and faces different circumstances for their climate action. Every country will meet its climate and economic development goals in its own way and at its own pace. We need to equip people with the education and skills needed for the jobs of the future so that they can thrive in a greener economy. Social safety nets will also need to be expanded to shelter the most vulnerable groups. In closing, the OECD will continue to contribute solutions to our shared global challenges. We stand ready to do more to advance value-based and human-centric standards, more to ensure models of digital and technology governance are fit for purpose, more to help upskill and reskill workers, more to reduce emissions, to increase climate resilience and to mobilize climate investment. Ladies and gentlemen, my very best wishes for a positive, productive and successful meeting, and thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Mathias Cormann, OECD. Thanks to all the speakers of today's conference for their outstanding contribution. And thank you all for attending on site and online. I think we had an afternoon, plenty of ideas, analysis and proposal, but it was day 1. Day 2 of the Global Policy Forum continues tomorrow starting at 2 p.m. CET. So thanks again and good evening, everyone. Thank you.